Hey man, let's talk about something most people don't have the courage to say out loud. Women do not feel guilt the same way men do. When a man hurts someone, it echoes in his mind for weeks. He replays the moment, analyzing what he could have done differently. It eats at him. But when a woman hurts a man, especially one who truly cared, she doesn't process that pain the same way. Her emotional system isn't wired for reflection when she's the one who benefits from moving on. She's conditioned by modern society to detach, to do what feels right for her, even if it leaves devastation in her wake. While you sit there broken, trying to understand how she could walk away so easily, she's not feeling guilt, she's feeling justified. You see, guilt requires empathy, the ability to emotionally experience another person's suffering as your own. But many women today have replaced empathy with entitlement. They don't ask, how did my actions affect him? They ask, did this serve me? When the answer is yes, guilt evaporates. This isn't pure evil, it's conditioning. For years, women have been told that their happiness comes first, no matter who bleeds for it. Movies, social media, even modern relationship advice, all of it preaches emotional self-preservation disguised as empowerment. So when she leaves you without closure, replaces you before your side of the bed gets cold, or paints herself as the victim, that's not guiltlessness born from malice. It's guiltlessness born from justification. She believes she's right, even while you're left in ruins. What most men don't realize is that a woman's emotional nature is inherently reactive, not reflective. When she feels something deeply, attraction, anger, disappointment, she acts in the moment. She doesn't stop to evaluate long-term consequences. That's why she can say she loves you one week and ghost you the next. That's why she can cry over a breakup and post selfies 2 days later. Her emotional truth changes with her environment, and because she confuses emotion with morality, she doesn't feel guilty for switching sides. To her, what's true is whatever she feels right now. The moment she stops feeling connected, the moment the spark fades, she gives herself moral permission to leave. It's not personal, it's how she rationalizes detachment. You, on the other hand, were built differently. Men form attachments through consistency, investment, and loyalty, not fleeting emotion. So when you commit with your soul. You build, you protect, you envision a future. That's why her betrayal hits so deep, because you invested in permanence while she was living in moments. You remember her words, her promises, her tears. But for her, those were emotions of that time, not eternal vows. When her feelings changed, she redefined the meaning of everything you shared. And because women live by how they feel, she never sees that as betrayal, only as honoring her truth. She feels relief, not remorse. Freedom, not guilt. Here's the harsh truth, man. Guilt requires a fixed moral compass. It demands a sense of right and wrong that doesn't shift with convenience. But modern women live in emotional fluidity, not ethical stability. They justify betrayal with phrases like, I had to do what's best for me, or we just grew apart. That's not reflection, that's rewriting history. When you replay every moment wondering if she ever cared, she's busy editing her own story to make herself the hero. She can't feel guilt when she's convinced herself she was the victim all along, and she will. Because to feel guilt is to admit she destroyed something pure, and most people today would rather build lies than face that kind of truth. This is why silence from a man hurts her more than any argument, because silence doesn't give her a villain. When you stop fighting, stop explaining, stop proving your pain, you take away her justification. She can't say he was crazy or he was controlling. You just disappear, calm, composed, detached. That's when cracks begin to form in her narrative. Guilt doesn't arrive immediately. It seeps in slowly, through contrast. When every man after you lacks your patience, your depth, your restraint, that's when she starts to feel something close to guilt. But by then, it's not empathy, it's loss. It's the pain of realizing she ruined something rare. And because her ego won't allow her to admit fault, that pain gets buried beneath pride. Women don't feel guilt, they feel absence. They don't regret hurting you, they regret losing what you gave them. The emotional stability, the attention, the validation, the safety, that's what they crave, not redemption. That's why you'll often see an ex act distant until you move on. and then suddenly she resurfaces, saying she misses you. It's not guilt, it's hunger. She's not remorseful, she's nostalgic. She wants to taste the power of your attention again, not atone for the pain she caused. This is how the emotional cycle repeats. She returns when she feels empty, not when she feels sorry. And if you mistake that for guilt, you'll fall right back into her trap. You have to understand something deeper here. Women are survival-driven creatures. Emotionally, socially, and biologically, they are wired to prioritize security. When a woman feels unsafe, unloved, or uncertain, she'll act in self-preserving ways that often look cruel from the outside. She'll rationalize betrayal as self-care. She'll frame her abandonment as growth. She'll convince herself that you were no longer aligned. That's not a lie. That's a coping mechanism. She has to create that story to live with herself. If she allowed guilt to surface, it would destroy her self-image. So she buries it under affirmations, distractions, and denial. And the more she suppresses guilt, the more detached she becomes from consequence. But you, man, you don't get to numb yourself that way. You carry the guilt even when you did nothing wrong, because you feel responsible for everything. Her happiness, her pain, the relationship's failure. You internalize it. That's what makes you masculine, your sense of duty. But it's also what breaks you if you don't learn how to let go. Because guilt isn't always noble. Sometimes it's self-destructive. You cannot heal by blaming yourself for her choices. You cannot rebuild by replaying the moment she chose to abandon empathy. Guilt will keep you tied to a ghost. Understanding will set you free. So remember this, when a woman walks away cold, it's not because she's heartless. It's because she's conditioned not to feel consequence. Society shields her from accountability. Friends tell her, you deserve better. Social media feeds her validation. She never sits in silence long enough to feel remorse. Meanwhile, you drown in introspection. But here's the shift. Stop envying her emotional numbness. Because numbness isn't strength, it's emptiness. She might not feel guilt now, but one day when she's alone, when no one's validating her choices, when life gets quiet, that's when guilt transforms into regret. It may not come when you want it to, but it always comes. The most deceptive thing about women's lack of guilt is how easily they disguise it as empowerment. You'll hear phrases like, I had to choose myself, or I did what was best for me. Those words sound powerful, but they often mask selfishness, dressed as healing. It's a linguistic trick, one that absolves her of the need to feel remorse. Instead of sitting with the reality that she hurt someone who loved her, she reframes the story so she's not the villain. That's how she keeps her self-image clean. Modern validation culture has turned selfishness into self-love, and the cost, accountability, dies quietly in the background. Guilt used to be a signal of conscience. Now it's dismissed as weakness. When she hurt you, she didn't feel shame because society told her shame was oppression. But what they never told her is that guilt is what keeps love honest. When a woman can't feel guilt, she also can't feel depth. That's the hidden tragedy. You might think she's cold because she's heartless, but the truth is, she's disconnected. Guilt connects us to humanity. It's the emotional bridge between cause and consequence, between action and empathy. Without it, life becomes transactional. Love becomes a performance. Connection becomes conditional. That's why so many men say modern relationships feel empty, because women today aren't seeking love, they're seeking emotional leverage. And when you remove guilt, leverage becomes the only language left. You'll notice it in subtle ways. The way she apologizes only when she's caught, or the way she cries when you pull away, not when she hurts you. Her emotions are tools, not truths. And that's what makes her seem heartless. Not because she doesn't feel, but because she feels selectively. And selective emotion is the greatest weapon of the modern feminine. It's how she maintains control. She'll allow herself to feel pain when it benefits her image, but she'll bury it when it threatens her ego. She'll post about heartbreak online, but never admit how she caused it. She'll claim trauma from toxic men, but never confront her own toxicity. Guilt would force her to self-reflect, and self-reflection is uncomfortable. It would make her question her own narrative, and that's the one thing her pride cannot handle. So instead, she projects. She transfers the emotional burden to you. Suddenly, the man who loved her deeply becomes the problem. She convinces herself you were the reason for her unhappiness, not her lack of integrity. That's how women escape guilt. through emotional projection disguised as self-awareness. You'll notice something else too. Her healing journey begins the moment she leaves you. She'll talk about rediscovering herself, about finding peace, about setting boundaries, but what she's really doing is running from guilt before it catches up. That's why her healing feels rushed, almost theatrical. Real healing is slow and painful. It involves acknowledging the people you hurt, but she's skipping that part. She's numbing with affirmations, rebounds, and distractions. And because she confuses distraction with progress, she never truly grows. The pain she avoids now will return later, doubled, deeper, and directed inward. But in the meantime, she looks happy, and that's what breaks you. You watch her smiling while you're bleeding, not realizing that her smile is survival, not peace. Here's what most men don't understand. Women are emotionally intelligent, but not emotionally accountable. They can read a man's emotions like a book. They know exactly when you're hurt, when you're anxious, when you're slipping. But instead of easing that pain, they'll often use it to test you. Because in her mind, guilt is weakness, but power is safety. So she'll provoke you, pull away, manipulate the situation, not out of malice, but out of fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of being vulnerable first. That's why when you confront her calmly, she panics. When you don't react, she spirals. Because deep down, she knows that real power doesn't need to manipulate, it simply walks away, and the absence of your reaction becomes the mirror she's been avoiding her whole life. This is why your silence is her punishment, not because you intended it that way, but because it leaves her alone with the one person she can't escape herself. And when the noise fades, when no one's telling her she's right, when the mirror is all she has left, that's when guilt begins to crawl up from the corners of her subconscious. But it's not guilt in the moral sense, it's emotional withdrawal. The same energy she once absorbed from you begins to fade. The same attention that fueled her ego disappears. That absence feels like pain, and she'll confuse it for guilt. She'll mistake missing your validation for missing you. But what she's really missing is the reflection of her own worth that your love once gave her. That's not remorse, that's dependency mourning its supply. You have to understand, most women today have never been taught emotional consequence. They live in a society where men are disposable, where attention is infinite, where accountability is optional. Every mistake can be repackaged as learning, every betrayal as self-discovery. So why would guilt exist in that ecosystem? Guilt thrives in environments of morality, not indulgence, and we live in an age that worships indulgence. The modern woman can replace you faster than she can process you, so she does, but the human psyche can't escape truth forever. Every ignored emotion stacks up like debt, and eventually she pays. Not through guilt in the traditional sense, but through emptiness, through a quiet ache that success, attention, or new men can't erase, and that's the cost of her emotional numbness. When you can't feel guilt, you also can't feel gratitude. You can't appreciate good men when they come. That's why she'll repeat the same cycle over and over, chasing highs, running from lows, never sitting still long enough to feel either. Every new connection becomes an escape from the last. But over time, escape becomes exhaustion. And when she's finally alone, when the silence becomes too loud, she'll realize the truth. Guilt wasn't her enemy, it was her teacher. But by then, it's too late. Because guilt requires humility to heal, and ego never allows that until everything's already gone. Meanwhile, you, the man she left, are learning the lessons she avoided. You're feeling the pain she refused to face. You're forced into solitude, into silence, into self-confrontation. That's why men evolve after heartbreak, because where women deflect, men reflect. You internalize, you dig into your pain until it transforms you. You learn emotional discipline, boundaries, purpose. You learn to live without external validation. And the irony, the very guilt that destroyed you in the beginning becomes your power later, because it pushes you toward growth. You become self-aware through suffering. You become strong through stillness. You become the man she'll never find again, because you were forged in the fire she ran from. That's why, when she eventually looks back, what she'll feel isn't guilt, it's emptiness. She won't cry because she hurt you. She'll cry because you're gone. Because the mirror she used to see her own worth through is shattered, and now she has to face her real reflection, the one she's been avoiding. That's not empathy, it's withdrawal. You see, guilt is for people who can admit they were wrong. Most women today don't want to be wrong. They want to be right, even at the cost of truth. So they rewrite history, reinvent memories, and reconstruct emotions until the guilt disappears. But truth doesn't vanish. It hides in silence, waiting, and it always returns. Not as guilt, but as karma. There comes a moment, after the anger and confusion fade, when you begin to see everything clearly, and it's both liberating and terrifying. You realize she never felt guilt because she never viewed the connection through the same lens you did. To her, love was an experience. To you, it was an investment. She wanted to feel while you wanted to build. When her emotions changed, her truth changed, and in her mind, that was enough to justify anything. That realization hurts, man. It shatters the illusion that love is reciprocal, but it also frees you. Because once you stop expecting emotional logic from someone who lives in emotional survival, you stop bleeding for their lack of conscience. You stop begging for closure from people who never had any. That's where your strength begins. Not in getting answers, but in accepting that some hearts are incapable of accountability. You'll notice that the longer you stay silent, the more her world starts to distort. The same woman who once felt invincible will start sensing something's missing. Not guilt exactly, but a void. You are her mirror, her emotional supply. When you stop feeding that energy, she begins to question her choices, not because she regrets them, but because they no longer make her feel good. The power she thought she gained by walking away begins to feel heavy. The attention from others starts to lose flavor. That's when life humbles her. Not instantly, but gradually, through failed connections, temporary highs, and emotional dead ends. And when that happens, the silence she once mocked becomes the mirror she can't look away from. Her lack of guilt doesn't mean she won. It means she lost the ability to connect with truth. Guilt is painful, yes, but it's also sacred. It's what keeps a human heart alive. Without it, people turn hollow. They chase pleasure to fill meaning. They seek validation to fill emptiness. They use relationships as distractions from themselves. That's why modern women seem restless, always moving from one phase to another, never satisfied. It's not empowerment, it's avoidance. When you see her pretending to be happy, know this. That's not peace, that's performance. You are real. Everything after you is rehearsal. The reason she can live without guilt is because she was never taught consequence. In today's world, accountability is considered oppression. Feelings are treated as truth. So when a woman feels unhappy, she believes that unhappiness alone justifies her actions, no matter how destructive. If she cheats, it's because she wasn't being fulfilled. If she leaves, it's because she wasn't growing. If she betrays, it's because she was protecting her peace. It's all emotional justification masquerading as wisdom, but feelings are fleeting, they shift like tides, so every decision made in emotion eventually collapses in logic. That collapse is where her guilt hides, not visible, but real. She just won't face it until she's alone enough to hear herself think, and when that loneliness finally hits her, it won't be cinematic, it'll be quiet, empty, and humiliating. Because she'll realize the men she thought were upgrades were just echoes of what she lost. They'll give her attention, but not presence. Desire, but not devotion. Pleasure, but not peace. That's when she'll start to reflect, not because she suddenly developed empathy, but because reality stripped her illusions. It's not guilt that changes women, it's consequence. It's the harsh mirror of seeing that her decisions didn't make her happier, only harder. She'll learn that walking away might have freed her from accountability, but it also exiled her from authenticity. You, meanwhile, will evolve in silence. That's the divine irony. The pain she escaped from becomes the soil you grow in. You start finding strength in solitude. You rebuild your focus, your mission, your peace. And with every new day that passes without her, you begin to realize something powerful. You don't want her back, not because you hate her, but because you outgrew the version of yourself that needed her. That's what guilt can never teach her. The beauty of transformation through pain. She'll move on physically, but you'll move on spiritually. And that difference will define the rest of your lives. She might appear fine, laughing, posting, living her best life, but every high she chases will feel shallower than the last. Because guilt has a strange way of resurfacing when the noise fades. It doesn't come as regret for what she did to you. It comes as dissatisfaction with what she became after you. She'll start missing who she was when she was with you. The warmth, the security, the purpose. That's when she realizes that she didn't just lose you. She lost a version of herself that existed because of your presence, and you can't replace that kind of energy. It lingers like a ghost, reminding her of the stability she traded for chaos. Most men spend months trying to make her feel guilty, posting quotes, begging for closure, seeking revenge through attention. But here's the truth. Guilt can't be forced on someone who lives in denial. The only thing that breaks denial is contrast. The calm of your absence against the chaos of her choices. The peace you build while she still chases validation. You don't need to teach her a lesson. Life will. You just need to disappear long enough for her illusions to collapse. And when they do, she won't be able to escape the one truth that silence screams. You were the only one who truly cared, and she destroyed it without even realizing what she had. That's why your peace is your revenge. When you stop explaining, stop defending, stop reacting, you reclaim your power. You stop playing her emotional game. You stop being the character in her story and become the author of your own. And the more you heal, the more she feels it. Not because she suddenly loves you again, but because energy doesn't lie. She feels your detachment. She senses your indifference. That's when her confusion begins. Why isn't he broken anymore? Why doesn't he care? Why do I still think about him when he's gone? That's not love returning. That's guilt being reborn through realization. And it always happens too late. Understand this deeply. A woman without guilt is dangerous, but not because she's evil. She's dangerous because she's disconnected from herself. And a disconnected person cannot love you. They can desire you, use you, admire you, even obsess over you, but they can't love you because love requires empathy, and empathy requires guilt. When she wrongs you and feels nothing, it's not because you didn't matter. It's because she's not present enough to feel at all. Her numbness is her curse, not your punishment. So stop waiting for her apology. Stop hoping for remorse. Her silence is your closure. Her indifference is your sign. Let her carry her guiltless freedom, because one day it'll turn into the heaviest burden she's ever known. As time passes, her emotional mask begins to crack. The same woman who once swore she felt nothing starts to sense a hollow ache she can't name. At first, she mistakes it for loneliness, then boredom, then stress. But deep down, it's the echo of guilt. The same guilt she suppressed when she walked away now lurks beneath her every silence. It shows up when she sees a couple walking hand in hand. It whispers when she lies awake next to someone new who doesn't make her feel safe. It's not guilt for what she did. It's guilt for what she destroyed, for the way she made something pure feel disposable. That realization doesn't arrive in a single moment. It creeps in slowly every time she's reminded of what real connection used to feel like. And because her ego can't accept fault, she'll spend years trying to drown that feeling in distractions. But guilt has a way of hiding in plain sight. It disguises itself as hyper-independence. She'll tell everyone she's better off alone, that she doesn't need anyone, that men are the problem. But look closely, and you'll see the cracks. The constant social validation, the endless self-help posts, the spiritual jargon about protecting her peace, all of it is noise, a defense mechanism to keep her from hearing the quiet truth that never leaves her alone. She let go of something real. Guilt lives in that silence between distractions. It's not loud, but it's persistent. Every time she tries to escape herself, it waits patiently for her to stop running. And that's the moment her internal collapse begins. Not because she feels sorry, but because she can no longer outrun the emptiness that guilt built inside her. Men often underestimate the long-term cost of female guilt suppression. While men process pain through suffering and reflection, women suppress it through rationalization. The difference? Men heal through clarity. Women crumble through denial. When a man accepts reality, he grows. When a woman denies reality, it festers. It leaks into her relationships, her self-worth, her identity. That's why, over time, her energy shifts. She becomes guarded, cynical, emotionally distant. She stops trusting love, not because love failed her, but because she betrayed it. And deep down, she knows it. She carries the ghost of you into every connection, comparing, regretting, justifying. That's not healing, that's haunting. And here's the irony, she'll keep pretending she's happy, while secretly craving the man who no longer needs her. She'll see your silence as indifference at first, then as peace, and eventually as superiority. That's when resentment begins to replace guilt. Instead of saying, I hurt him, she starts saying, he changed. She'll convince herself you became cold, heartless, detached, because she can't accept that you simply grew stronger without her. It's easier for her to label your evolution as cruelty than to face her reflection in it. That's how guilt transforms into projection. She'll hate you for being at peace because your peace reminds her of the chaos she created. By the time she realizes what she lost, it's not even about you anymore. It's about what you represented. You were her anchor in a world of emotional instability. You were her mirror when she didn't know who she was. You were the calm that made her believe love could be safe. When she let that go, she didn't just lose a man, she lost her grounding. Now, every man she meets afterward feels temporary, unpredictable, hollow. Because once a woman experiences masculine stability, she can never fully forget it. It imprints on her subconscious, and that memory becomes her curse. She'll keep chasing it in others, never realizing she's the one who burned the bridge to it. This is why your silence is more powerful than revenge. Revenge feeds her narrative. Silence erases it. When you don't react, when you don't chase, when you don't prove, you leave her with no story to tell. You become a blank space she can't rewrite. And that's the one thing her ego can't control. She can't label you, can't define you, can't use your pain to fuel her justification. You become an enigma, and that mystery eats at her more than any confrontation ever could. Because deep down, she knows that the man who walks away with dignity always haunts longer than the one who begs for closure. She'll try to fill that silence with noise, parties, flings, fake healing, endless self-love mantras, but none of it touches the depth she lost. Because peace isn't something you can perform, it's something you become. And the more she chases artificial calm, the more her mind betrays her. Her guilt will show up in unexpected ways. Irritation at seeing you move on, jealousy when she hears about your growth, even anger when you're doing well without her. That's how women process guilt, not through apology, but through projection. They'll hate you for the peace they forfeited, but hate is just guilt in disguise, wearing the mask of pride. You'll eventually learn that her guilt is none of your concern. That's the secret every strong man discovers. You don't need her remorse to heal. Her silence doesn't mean you weren't enough. Her lack of guilt doesn't mean she didn't care. It simply means she wasn't capable of handling something real, and that's not your loss, it's hers. You gave her something rare, a chance at stability, at love without conditions. She mistook that for weakness, and now she'll spend years chasing fragments of the feelings she once took for granted. But you'll have peace, because guilt is only powerful when you let it keep you tied to the past. Once you release the need for her to feel it, you win. There will come a day when she sees you again, maybe online, maybe in person, and it'll hit her differently this time. Not with nostalgia, but with recognition. She'll recognize the man she couldn't break, the man who outgrew her emotional reach. You'll look the same, maybe even calmer, but your energy will feel untouchable. That's the moment her suppressed guilt transforms into quiet regret. She won't say it, she won't text you, she might even act indifferent, but internally she'll crumble. Because guilt delayed is guilt intensified. Every suppressed emotion she avoided will rush back at once, and the pain she once gave you freely will finally find its way home to her. By then, you'll understand the real lesson. You were never supposed to teach her guilt. You were supposed to learn detachment. You were meant to see that the masculine spirit doesn't beg for justice in emotional chaos. It transcends it. You were meant to rise above her inconsistency, not mirror it. Her lack of guilt was your initiation into self-mastery. It forced you to stop looking for validation and empathy that doesn't exist. It taught you that peace isn't given, it's earned through surrender. And as you walk away, lighter and wiser, you'll finally see it. Her lack of guilt was never your punishment, it was your awakening. Because sometimes the greatest mercy life gives you is the ability to let go of someone who can't feel what you feel and still walk away without hate in your heart. There's a poetic justice in how time balances everything. When you first walked away, she felt free, liberated, weightless, certain she had made the right choice. But freedom without reflection turns to emptiness, and weightlessness eventually feels like floating with no direction. That's when guilt begins its slow metamorphosis into karma. It doesn't strike her suddenly, it unfolds through subtle realizations, one failed relationship at a time, one sleepless night at a time, one quiet drive home after yet another meaningless connection. It's the accumulation of unlearned lessons. You see, guilt doesn't die when denied, it merely delays its return. And when it does come back, it doesn't knock. It floods her life with the exact energy she once projected onto you. She starts attracting the kind of men she used to be, emotionally avoidant, self-absorbed, unable to connect deeply. She'll fall for men who treat her as an option, not because she deserves punishment, but because the universe uses mirrors, not whips. Every tear she once ignored in you will show up in her reflection now, not as poetic justice, but as divine equilibrium. That's how karma works. It's not revenge, it's revelation. The very things she dismissed as your weakness, loyalty, depth, vulnerability, will now be the things she begs for in others. And when those men can't give it to her, she'll finally feel the ache she once left you with. But by then, you'll have already transcended her emotionally. The universe has a way of making silence loud when it's time for someone to listen. And for her, silence becomes unbearable. No longer surrounded by your calm reassurance, your patience, or your presence, she's forced to face her own noise. It's the noise of self-justification, the constant need to convince herself she did nothing wrong. But guilt isn't fooled by affirmations. It lingers beneath every "I'm fine." It echoes in her chest when she scrolls through old photos. It's in the hesitation before she posts something new. In the quick glance at your profile before she exits the app. That's guilt. Not loud, not dramatic, but persistent. It lives in the small pauses she never admits to anyone. You'll be somewhere else by then. Physically, emotionally, spiritually. You'll have moved beyond the point of wanting her to hurt. Because evolution doesn't crave revenge, it craves peace. You'll realize that her guilt, her karma, her regrets, none of it heals you. What heals you is the distance between who you were when she broke you and who you became after she left. That gap, that growth, is your real closure. You'll understand that the goal was never to make her feel sorry. It was to learn that your worth doesn't depend on someone else's remorse. You'll stop searching for fairness and start appreciating freedom. That's the moment you truly win. Meanwhile, her smile will start to fade in ways only she notices. The laughter won't reach her eyes anymore. The validation she gets from others will feel hollow. The nights will stretch longer. Not because she misses you specifically, but because she misses what she felt when she was with you. The peace she mistook for boredom, the stability she confused for weakness, the love she interpreted as control. That's the cruel irony of life. It teaches people the value of peace only after chaos becomes unbearable. She'll try to recreate what you gave her, but no man will carry the same presence. No one will look at her with that kind of purity again. And that realization will haunt her far longer than guilt ever could. At some point, she'll tell herself a story to cope. Maybe she'll convince herself you changed, or that you were never that good. That's her ego's last defense mechanism, rewriting the past to protect the present. But truth has a way of seeping through those cracks. One random night, maybe years later, she'll remember your face in perfect stillness, not angry, not pleading, just calm. That memory will pierce her deeper than any argument ever could, because calmness is conviction, silence is closure, and in that moment, the guilt she's been running from will finally crystallize into regret, the kind that doesn't fade, the kind that rewrites her understanding of love forever. What makes this poetic is that you'll have no idea when it happens. You won't see her message, you won't hear her confession, and you won't feel her sorrow. That's the beauty of emotional detachment. You no longer need proof. You'll sense it in the air, in the way the universe feels quieter around you. Because when a man truly lets go, his energy becomes untouchable. She'll think about reaching out, maybe to apologize, maybe to reconnect, but she won't. Not because she doesn't want to, but because pride won't let her. And that's her real punishment, knowing she finally sees your worth, but it's too late to tell you. You'll move through your days lighter, calmer, more grounded. The pain that once consumed you will turn into wisdom that anchors you. You'll notice that your standards rise naturally. You no longer tolerate confusion, inconsistency, or half-hearted effort. You'll stop chasing emotions and start valuing energy. And every time someone tries to play the same game she once did, you'll smile. Not with bitterness, but with recognition. You've seen this movie before, and now you know how it ends. You no longer need to explain yourself to anyone who doesn't understand your worth. That's the final transformation of masculine energy, when you stop reacting and start radiating. She, on the other hand, will live with the slow decay of emotional memory. She'll replay the times you forgave her, the way you looked at her like she was the only one, the sound of your voice when you said her name with warmth. Those moments will echo through her for years, not because she misses you as a person, but because you represent something she can't recreate: safety, simplicity, sincerity. And every time she finds herself in the arms of a man who only sees her surface, she'll remember the depth she once had but couldn't appreciate. That's when guilt becomes grief. Grief for the man she pushed away and the version of herself that vanished with him. And so the cycle completes. You rise while she unravels. You evolve while she replays. That's the true nature of emotional justice. It doesn't roar, it whispers. Her guilt will never arrive in the form of an apology. It will arrive in sleepless nights, hollow connections, and quiet moments of truth. And you'll learn to thank her in silence, because she was the lesson you didn't know you needed, the fire that refined your spirit, the betrayal that built your boundaries, the heartbreak that became your resurrection. In the end, you'll realize that her guilt was never your closure, your growth was. Because when you master peace in a world that tried to break you, there is no higher revenge, no deeper healing, and no stronger form of power.